happy to be joined this time by Mauro Risch, who's going to be talking to us about a number of very interesting life experiences. But we will start by saying hello, Mauro, and inviting you just to give a little bit of information about who you are and what you do.
Colin, it's a pleasure to be here. I've been a commercial photographer born in Brazil, and for the last couple of decades, yes, we moved to Australia, so I've been doing the same career path with different nuances, but mostly in photography has been the story of my life. Photography mostly, yes.
So when you say photography, can you just explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, in Brazil, my studio was in Rio de Janeiro, and for a couple of decades, I did work with advertising agencies. So the advertising industry was basically my client, and every time there was a campaign or something that the advertising agencies needed to do photos of, they would come to me with a layout and they would say, we need to produce this specific campaign. Could you help us produce these images? And that's what I've done for 22 years in Brazil. Yes.
For you, though, Mauro, was it always going to be advertising? Is that something you'd sort of thought about at school as a young man?
Actually, I had a normal academic career, regular, I went to high school, and when it came time to choose my career for the rest of my life, the one career that I really saw fit was to become a doctor. So I did my test, my exams in Rio, which is a series of exams that you do to all the Rio de Janeiro applicants. So there were 115,000 applicants at that year, and I came out really top 50 of the whole bunch. So it gave me the choice to select the medicine school that I wanted to go, which was the National Federal University of Medicine in Rio de Janeiro, which would give me 6 years of studies for free. So that was the career path that I was driven to, that I embraced. Previous to my medicine, I had early ages, early teens, photography as a hobby. The moment I started thinking about what to me was really interesting because I had photography as a hobby. My parents supported my hobby because it was a very expensive one. You had to film, you had to buy a camera, not a phone, you had to buy lenses. It was quite an expensive hobby to maintain. And also, my grandmother played a really good part in that because she loved being photographed everywhere all the time. So she was kind of a muse model that was always happy to take me anywhere so that I could take photos of her in that background. So that was a
So,
funny
So
thing.
let me ask you, Mauro. So it's a tired word, unfortunately, but the word passion. Photography was your passion, but you felt at that moment that maybe medicine was your calling. Was there any family pressure to make a decision about medicine, or did that come from you as well?
No, well, I don't think there was any pressure to choose medicine school as my career path at that point. The thing that I really think about these days is that the lack of information of other careers out there. So when I thought of photography, I only knew wedding photography. That's the only way that I would, in a way, be able to provide for my family in the future. So and to develop a career. So becoming a wedding photographer was not really my choice. So medicine school, yes, we have a few doctors in the family, and I felt like I had a really good close touch to this field. And yes, was a normal career. There was no pressure to go that way. But really after 2 years of medicine school, I was probably very young. I was probably not even 19 years old. And I felt the need to try different things, that I might not be able to experience, especially at an early age. Once you start your medicine school career, your academic life, yes, you're going to spend the next 10 years at uni and doing residency in hospitals and clinics.
At that point, then, so after 2 years of medical school and having these thoughts, these doubts, what kind of guidance at that point did you turn to? Who were you able to perhaps have the conversation with to make a decision about the course of your academic career and how things will go in future?
Great question. I think that there was no specific person other than my father's brother who was also a teacher at medicine school where I attended to. I used to go with him and take a lift with to get to the campus every day on time with him. So we used to chat, yes. Other people in the medicine world had big influence in me, but I really had this idea that it might not be something that I want to pursue for the rest of my life. In a way, medicine school felt a bit boring, especially the 2 first years, which are the basic course. It was not stimulating enough for me. So I met one guy at the second year who just came from a backpacking trip of a full year in Europe and the Middle East. And it was kind of, wow, I think I might want to do something. There's a bit of a National Geographic magazine touch to it, to become an explorer, to know the world, to learn languages and different places of the world. So it kind of was the seed to me. And so I did. I really found a way to pause my studies at university for a full year and went to the Middle East, where I traveled to a few countries, met a lot of people. And the people I met there, who were coming from other places, but mostly Europe, gave me a lot of tips on what to do in Europe for a few months, or which came at the end almost a full year in Europe, working, studying in a few places so that I could afford my walking around and traveling around without having to ask my parents. Great. And I always had my camera with me, which is very interesting.
Now,
If I
I have to ask
remember,
regarding the
okay.
camera and the quality of the camera that you took with you as a backpacker. I know that front of mind perhaps is security and dare I damage my lovely camera and the accompanying accessories. So you went with the intention of actually taking pictures as kind of a part of a mission, or is just happenstance?
The answer, I would say, I didn't even think about the option of not having the camera next to me when I go anywhere. So it was really just like a part of me that it would make part of my life in a very simple way. Not too much thinking was part of.
Were you able to get by in different languages at that point?
I had English as a pretty good uh, understanding and proficiency level. Maybe I was really really well with English, but Spanish speaking some words in Peru and not having fear of embarrassment of talking wrong words. I never had that limitation in my life when it comes to languages. I really started to learn a little bit of English there, of Spanish, I'm sorry, as a third language. While I was in Europe, languages were really not that hard. Of course, there are many tales. What's the best way for you to learn a language? But I think in my case, not feeling ashamed or limited to making mistakes in any other language, I just made the effort to speak Italian, which I spent quite a long time in Italy. I had a chance to study in a small agricultural school in Switzerland in the French side of it. So I was able to learn. I think the Latin languages for us in Brazil are not that hard. Once you know the little nuances of the grammar, Spanish, Italian, French will come easier in an easy way. Yeah, I can travel in any of these languages, including English, and and most of the words in the other countries which I'm not fluent. The bad words are the easy ones for you to learn really
And the
quick. Yes,
first, and the first. So
yes.
you've put your course on hold, your medicine course, and then you get back to Brazil. And when does the switch take place?
I started talking before I decided it was about time to go back to Brazil. After a year and some months, I started to talk to my parents and I said, look, medicine is not going to be my way. Of course, my mother had a mental breakdown because having a son graduate as a doctor was her dream, coming from an immigrant's family. She was first generation Brazilian, I was second. So becoming a doctor was a dream for her. When I said that becoming a doctor was not in my plans, she really had a tough time, and today I can understand. but I wanted to experience something more related to photography. There was no photography courses in Rio de Janeiro back then, no university courses. There was a cinema course in one state university, but that's not what I wanted. So the option was transferring from medicine courses, from medical school, to a course that was communication studies, which had something to do with the creative side, the productive side with visuals that I had in my mind. And that's what we did. So when I came back to Brazil, we were able to transfer my course to communication studies, which took me a few years to complete. And I was able to graduate with my major in advertising. We say in Brazil advertising and publicity, but it's basically advertising. That was my major degree.
Might be interesting to hear from you just a little bit about the advertising industry, especially the advertising industry as it was then in Brazil, because I think it's a uniquely fertile area. It's done extremely well for a long time. Is that correct?
Yes, the advertising industry was really one of the top when it comes to creative minds in the world, not just in South America, was really there was a golden age. And I have to mention one thing that a lot of times when I talk to kids to university or career speeches, I have to mention that yes, there's a lot of ingredients that are part of your career choices, but of course, we're talking about talent, some talent for something that you have as your skills. You're born with it, you can develop a little bit. Yes, determination and dedication, because the sweat is always part of your success. If you don't make the effort, I doubt that most people will get anywhere close to any successful career. But in my case, I've been thinking about that for the last few years. Absolutely, there was luck in many, many moments, not just one moment. There are many situations where I was very lucky throughout my career and throughout my life choices, so to speak.
Sort of right place at the right time, or other kind of circumstances?
Yes, of all kinds. So when I became aware of my passion for photography, yes, slowly I started to build up cameras that I like and learn with the craft, not so much studying, because even today I think photography is the craft that you learn by practicing. You can study photography a lot. You can read many books. You can talk to the masters and watch the masters working, but practice is what will make you become a photographer. I always said that to my students in photography courses. If you want to get out of a university degree as a photographer, you have to have entered your university as a photographer beforehand. You don't become a photographer by reading books.
So this is interesting. At the point that you made the decision to leave medicine and to dedicate yourself to some photography in some way, you already told us that there wasn't much choice. Communication is what you did, but all things being equal, you probably would have tried to do some kind of photography degree. Did that landscape change while you were still in Brazil? Like, did courses appear, or how did that change, or has it not?
I don't think so. It was not a conscious decision, or it was not a clear path to me. It was really going with the flow. And I said before, I have been very intuitive in my decision making process for forever, which makes me go with the one direction without thinking too much. And in that sense, I've been very lucky in many senses. For example, I had at year 11 at school, there was a photography award competition, which is, you know what, it doesn't hurt. I'm and see where I'm standing at. So it was year 11, so I was probably 14 years old or 15 tops. And I submitted photos in two categories, in color category and black and white. So yes, I sent a few photos. A lot of kids at that time were all photographers. You know, anyone can say that. Fantastic. But after a few days, the results came out, and they sent me someone to tell me, look, you got a decent position in the color photography competition. Would you like to know what your... And I said, yeah, of course. Yeah, tell me. Well, you won the first prize in color photography for the competition, which was a surprise to me. I was like, wow, fantastic. And back then, the prize were a box of films and a few little things, including a key holder from photography lab, something like
Mm.
that. Then the same guy came to me. Do you want to know what you got on a black and white category? What happened? You got first prize as well. So I got also first prize in black and white, which was a photo of a person sleeping in a bench in the middle of the street, a poor person, a homeless person, and it was quite a poetic image. Of course, hard to judge these days what that meant, but I was very lucky in that sense. Yes, I submitted images, got first prize, got a bit of a, yeah, but I couldn't see that as a career back then. No one would see that as a career. Although I was making side money taking photos of some of my colleagues, the pretty ones, the surfing competitions. I would go with my camera taking photos of the guys surfing or sports activity, or we had barbecue at school. I would take photos of everyone. Everyone would cash, for a couple of bucks, people would say, yeah, I want a copy. I want a copy. You do black and white lab at home. It was nice. It was not big money, but in a way, it was teaching me the business of photography, which I think most courses, when it comes to visual arts, fail badly because we talk a lot about the talents, arts, and crafts, but we are not taught how to survive in a wild world is or was in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. That was really, really good. And that was it. So I didn't intend or didn't plan them to happen, but were little bits of luck. The big moment of luck that I always mention is that one of my best friends, we used to play beach volleyball. Well, he bought his first motorbike, very nice. And one day he calls me and says, look, I have this company. They are a precious metal company, and they want photos of their 1 kilo gold bars. Easy. I have my Nikon camera. I have photographed all of Europe, Middle East, North of Africa. I can do anything. And there we go. We went as partners for this photo shoot inside a massive company that looked like a bank. Our studio was actually set inside a safe, a 2 by 2 meters safe. Not a big space, but that's where we set up our lighting and camera. And we did a few photos, and the first results were terrible, awful. I learned on the first day that a Nikon camera was not suited for that kind of work. Lighting that I knew and understood was useless. So we went from there talking to the guys at the lab who were professionals, and they were kind enough to tell us, look, you should and try this type of light. Back next day, next day, next day, 2 weeks shooting, nothing decent. Horrible, horrible work. After 3 weeks, we came across a guy that was specialized in product photography. I'm talking in the that people take for granted. In the 80s was we had a lot less resources than we have these days. But it was great because then we found out about the perfect camera for this job, which is a studio view camera, which is a bellows camera. A camera that looks like 70s, all made by a Swiss company called Sinar, and they're very expensive. And for you to pilot that camera, you need time. But we took the challenge. We bought this camera. We go back again, and after a week, we finally got some amazing, amazing images of 1 kilo gold bars. We understood lighting. We understood reflective material, backgrounds. We understood focus. For example, with this camera, it allows you to change optics. There are many rules and laws of optics that we didn't have a clue, but we learned to go on the fly. It was fantastic. So after 30 days, we got a lot of material. Beautiful. We didn't know how to charge. He said, no, this is how much I'm going to pay you. We were like, really? Is that much money? We can make much money with doing photography of gold, 1 kilo gold bars. And we were very lucky with that. A few weeks go by and the client contacts us again. Look, there's a bank that saw your photos. They want to service again. And so we went. It became uh, the way to go for us. We didn't market our service to anyone. We were just sucked into people wanting our work and our photography nonstop. And then the banks who supplied gold and platinum and silver to jewelers, they recommended us to that industry. So we started shooting for big jewelry shops in Brazil, and it hasn't stopped till today. So it's been decades. I don't do jewelry or gold anymore, but I have not stopped working as a photographer since that first job. And it's been, in that sense, it's luck because this friend of mine worked. We were naive enough to think that we could found a way to make it work, and one thing after the other. Then product photography, then campaigns, then food. Then I was very lucky to work for some of the largest brands in the world: Coca-Cola and Pepsi, tobacco companies, airlines, beauty products like L'Oreal, Lancome, all the big players in the advertising industry for companies established in Brazil. And then again, lucky moves. L'Oreal Paris needed my work. So fantastic, working for another country. New York advertising agency saw some of my work, and I was able to do some work with them for another client. And so we went. Uh,
So
On and on and on. A sequence of lucky strikes.
we then, moving on, another important transition comes up in your life, and that is moving country. Can you tell me how did that come about?
Yes, it's quite an interesting thing because I didn't mention that the best thing that happened to me changing university courses, my wife, which I've been married to for the last 38 years. So that was the best thing that happened to me after moving to advertising communication studies at uni. And from 1995 to 2005, 10 years go by after I started being the first digital photography studio in Brazil. I didn't stop for a day. The demand for this kind of work was so intense that I almost had a physical breakdown. What do I mean? I was working sometimes 6 days a week, sometimes 7 days a week. My team would stay in the studio. I wouldn't have a family life. My second kid, my daughter, was born. So what happened was my wife came to me with the idea. She knew I wanted to live out overseas with my family someplace for a year. So she came to me and said, why don't we have a sabbatical year? This was the year of 2006 when she came up with the idea. And I thought she was crazy because interrupting my work for 1 year is a bit of a crazy thing, but at the same time, it was the best thing that could have ever happened to me. So we discussed the idea. We thought, how about we try Melbourne? We knew from a holiday trip before, we have family in Melbourne, and we agreed, okay, let's try Melbourne for a year, see what the experience is like, and give the kids the chance to study abroad. And even my wife was doing her master's in fashion here at RMIT. So it was a great idea. She came up with the idea, and it was fantastic. Not having to work gave me the chance to appreciate my love for photography more than the business of photography, because with so much work, you become a manager of things. You stop being just a photographer. But it was good. We had a big team at the studio in Brazil, but it was great being able to transition to Australia or experiencing Australia, and it was a beautiful experience of 1 year. At the end of it, one person that I met in one of these events, of networking events that I went to know a little bit more about Australia, they owned a video production company and a photographer to help them with their photography needs. And what happened was they offered me a position as a photographer with this big production company. It was really interesting. I was not thinking about it, but then came the idea of them sponsoring me, which was fantastic. When they said that, I right away shared that with my wife, and she said, well, that might be an interesting path for us to think of a life in Australia one day. And this is how it went. Yes, it was not. it was just to try life in somewhere else, some other place, and especially to give our kids the chance to understand the world better from, a different perspective, not just Brazil, Rio de Janeiro,
Was
from what we already had. And it was fantastic. It was really, really special. It humbles you because in the place where you've been feeling like you are the king of the bunch, all of a sudden you come to a place where no one knows you. It's very humbling and puts you in the right mindset because it changes your focus for life. You understand a lot of different things, but it was amazing because all of a sudden I was walking the dog, taking my kids to school and picking them up at school. So yes, it was a learning curve as a human being. It was amazing. Was really special and again lucky. I think I was very lucky. I can't say enough. Yes, I am known mostly in the industry here in Australia as the hotel photographer. It came probably very early after we moved to Australia. I had some experience working with hotels in South America, mostly with three hotel groups that I had the chance to work with, especially when I started doing digital photography. So these three hotel chains, I had the chance to work mostly in Brazil and South America, other properties in the continent. So it gave me a little bit of experience and mileage. But after coming here, I really saw potential in that area. I started talking to a few hotel groups in Sydney, Melbourne. I even went to Auckland in New Zealand, Singapore, and Hong Kong, where some of the head offices were. And I went specifically to offer my services and to see the chance of becoming a preferred photographer for the brand. In with some of them I was successful. Some of them there was no really room for change. They have had professionals working with them, but it was really an interesting move. Out of the top 10 hotel chains in the world, I became a preferred photographer for five of those top 10 hotel chains, which was, I could have never dreamt of anything that good. And I'll tell you why. I had someone who came to work with me. She was the manager here at the studio. We were do research of what the best hotels were in the Asia Pacific, mostly in Australia, but also I wanted to think wider and think of Asia Pacific with all the growth that is happening or was and is happening with the economy in these countries. And we were able to find out and start communicating with the head offices and the marketing teams, sometimes with the revenue managers or general managers of many of these groups. They were all open to this. Of course, they're busy. They don't have time to see me every time and go see with my folio under my arms and discuss any ideas. But most people in Australia are open to new ideas, to developing a relationship or to seeing things that I could show them from my experience in Brazil and my experience in other markets like in the US and other countries in South America. So it was really good. It took a while because nothing in this industry happens overnight. There's a lot of planning, different to advertising, where when you ask when is the deadline for that job, they will always say yesterday. That's when I need it done. So that's how I was used to working with the advertising. There's no time for breathing. It's now and always now. With the hospitality industry, there is a bit more of planning, and it was beautiful. It takes time for them to develop a relationship, but at the same time, once they trust in your work, it starts flowing. I had the chance to visit all of Australia, mostly. There's probably a few places I have not been for work, which is such a nice thing for me, but also visiting and working almost all the islands in the South Pacific, Southeast Asia, including Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand, China. It became something close to that
huh?
ideal National Geographic vision, which is traveling to countries, work with different people, different languages, and different food, different cultures. And it's been just a blessing. I've had the privilege of doing these things, which I don't call work. People call work. Yes, that's what puts the bread on the table. Yes, I've been lucky to be able to provide for my family for the last few decades, yes, but I can't see this just as work. It's way more than work for me, and I enjoy every time. It's been really good. One thing that I am quite asked about that, and I see your point, is sometimes when I'm talking to students, they tend to see the photography career with a bit more glamour than it really is, especially at this day and age where we have social media, talking all the time about the perks of what any career is. Photography is a great career, yes. It demands a lot from you, it requires a lot from you of dedication and preparation, absolutely. Understanding the business of photography, I would strongly say that it's very important. If you're not the business front of your craft, at least have someone next to you that might help you or guide you that way. But what I see the difference is every time I go talk somewhere, they always say, "Oh, you have the best job in the world." I think I have the best job in the world because I've been doing this for decades, and I want to be able to do that for a few more decades if my health and my age allows me to do that, of course. But don't fool yourself by thinking that everything is flying first class and drinking champagne at the business lounge. No, that's not reality. You have to be able to improvise sometimes and focus really on what you're there for. You're only as good as a photographer as your last job. If your last job failed, your career and your reputation could be in jeopardy. So this is something that we have to understand, which I think the younger generation or some professionals don't have the reach to understand the implications of that. Once your reputation is damaged, it's very hard to go back on track. So I would strongly recommend be careful with every move you make. Try to set up a path that you can and you must do, things you can deliver, things you should try to go a little bit beyond what you can deliver. I have done that. I've been called to do jobs that I was not ready to deliver, but the client came to me and said, "I trust you can do it. Let's see how you can do." A good example of that is the vice president of sales for one massive hotel chain asked me if I knew anything about filming in 360 degrees. I have never done it, but I knew it. Said, "Look, I've never done it before. If you want to take the risk, I'm happy to try." So he said, "I am sure you can do it." So there we went. We went to Fiji. We shot for 5 days, models, food, everything underwater. We had a 360 camera underwater, and it came out amazing. Really, the chances of going wrong were very high. Again, it didn't go wrong. It was amazing. The results were fantastic, and it's been used for their sales team with goggles with Apple Vision or Google for them to do sales for people who want to become members of their vacation club, which is fantastic. So, yes, there's a lot of little things that we don't know until we come across them. But be careful, be aware of things that you're not the best at yet, but try to excel always. Be confident. Try to be friendly to the people who are working with you. This is something that I see in advertising. It's not so practical because in advertising it's really a wild game. In hotels, amazing. I love because people treat you with so much kindness. People will call me and say, "Mauro, are you available to do a shoot for us in March 2026?" And I think it's still 8 months away from today. What are you asking me? And it's kind of a funny thing that I feel that someone is being so respectful to my craft that they are asking me 8 months in advance. I really love that, and I feel fantastic seeing that can happen with inside the industry.
A young person thinking about embarking on a career like yours, similar to yours, whether in advertising or something more niche like hotel photography, is now confronted with a reality whereby when you were a 17, 16-year-old, 15-year-old, you could enter a competition confident that if you took a good photo, that you could actually probably do a decent job and be in there with a chance. And as it happens, you won first prize black and white, first prize colour. Nowadays, everybody has a camera, and pretty decent quality cameras, and so there's never a moment goes by that people don't take a picture of their food or take a picture of each other or take a selfie. And of course we are now, social media, we're up to our eyeballs in social media pictures. So the complexion of the market has changed, and perhaps expectations as well. But what advice would you give to somebody contemplating a career in this field?
So many things that I would like to share about this, but probably my first suggestion when it comes to photography or visual arts in general is I would be fierce and decided to learn from my mistakes. What do I mean by that? We can learn photography in many ways. We can learn photography by watching other people work. We can learn photography by reading books or going to photography school. These are all very valid sources of knowledge and sometimes experience. But the mistakes you make when you are shooting, they are the most valuable experiences you can have. I can only value so much everything else, but every time I made a mistake or I failed or I did not deliver, those are those moments that make my career go to a better place, to the next level. This is always pushing me to go better, to excel. That was not good. What can I do to go better? So making mistakes in photography is the practice. This is what we have to accept. There's no one born a photographer that doesn't make mistakes. Sometimes you can make mistakes, but the client doesn't need to know it. You don't need to say that that was a mistake. Sometimes the mistakes are actually the artwork that becomes so amazing. Things that are just improvised and casually happening might come your way. So be aware of that. I would say also try to learn the most of the technical side of photography that you can. And I would advise not to become a slave of social media eyeballs. Engagement, likes, and comments can take you a very long way, but probably not as much as a photographer, mostly as an influencer. As a photographer, your craft needs to be on top of your game. Your images need to be, or at least you need to be trying to get images that are epic. Every single shot, every single job, every photo shoot, you have to come fresh and say, I'm going to do even better. I'm going to surprise myself as much as I'm going to surprise my client. This is something I would suggest. And it comes from within. It's very hard for you to learn that in a book or watching other people do. But a few people will inspire you. I've been able to go to a few studios, especially in New York, and watch other photographers work. Some of them, like Annie Leibovitz, I was very lucky to see her shooting. Other guys who are ahead of the game that we play today, which is mostly computer-based, which is mostly the digital world in photography. But yes, photography, in a way, since 1836 has not changed much. Photography is actually what you can imagine here. It's not the camera that you possess. It's not the phone. It's not the computer, not the laptop. It's really what your vision tells you. What do you want to achieve? What is the image that you want to tell? And again, you said one thing that is perfect. 90% of our mental stimulus or stimulation is visual. Most of the things of the input we get these days is visual. 90%. It could be a little bit more or less, but it's very, very powerful. And we have so much power with our images. Not just photos, because we're talking about still photos in the case of photography, but I've learned also to love the moving image. It's a recent because for the first decades, I really didn't like shooting film or videos. Now I actually enjoy it. I have my own way and I can bring my photography style to my filming production, which is something I had to teach myself in the last few years.
Mauro, you've been very generous with your time, and thank you so much for sharing your experience with us. And I look forward to talking to you again.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.